Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves.
Hello and welcome back, everybody. Today we have with us Dr. Susannah Ward, who's going to talk to us all about wellness. She's been in this space for quite a long time, so I'm very interested to hear your story. I'll let you introduce yourself. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I'm Susannah. I'm a rehabilitation specialist. I grew up in Sydney and did all my training in the metropolitan Sydney area. And then we have now relocated just north to the Newcastle area, and I live on Blacksmiths Beach. But yeah, I got into this wellness space, I suppose, through the training years to get me through and finish and get my ticket. And I've sort of continued in that area, and it's sort of been part of my sustainable medical practice.
Got it. Who was introducing wellness to you in your training? So is that because of the lifestyle medicine training you were doing, or is that something that was coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, no. So I haven't done lifestyle medicine or functional medicine. It's rehabilitation medicine. That was my advanced training with the College of Physicians. But the wellness came in, I think, because I've always been holistically minded. I see the big picture. I leaned on exercise and running during high school to get through my studies, and found that, movement was really helpful. And then also having a sort of balanced nutrition, especially when at work. And then it was my brother who tapped me on the shoulder to look into yoga. And I was living in Surrey Hills at the time, and I went to one of the best yoga studios created by one of the coolest Australian female yogis of our time. And it was just exactly what I needed, and it sort of got me interested in that more spiritual space when I'd previously been quite a bit dismissive of it, saw it a bit as like woo-woo and skeptical sort of thing. But then I experienced the holistic benefit of yoga, and then I started dabbling in Buddhist philosophy, and also became, just generally speaking, a self-help addict. And then I self-studied neuroscience, and I found a few podcasts that really enlightened my understanding of just the human brain and mind and the body, and further debunking that dualistic mindset around the distinction between the brain and the body. And yeah, it just all came from there. I think living on the beach and being immersed in nature as now my routine everyday lifestyle has also been a really huge aspect of my sort of wellness and spiritual path. Yeah.
Okay, so what was happening in your life that your brother tapped you on the shoulder and said you should try yoga? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it was like 2011, I think. I'd had a year off after doing my internship and residency in Australia, and I'd found those 2 years to be really challenging, and I was very, to be honest, resentful of the public health system. I'd lost all respect, and I found my career choice not to be what I had expected. And after a year off, I didn't come back with sort of any new insights about where I'd land. So I did a senior residency year in the two options that resonated with me most, which was psychiatry and rehabilitation medicine. And rehab one, purely based off the lifestyle. I mean, it's a wonderful area of medicine. It's multidisciplinary, it's holistic. You're talking about the values and priorities of the patients, and you're taking that sort of team-based approach, and it's beautiful. But really, what won out was the fact that there was not nights, the training was not onerous, and it wasn't long. So it really was just chosen for me in a sense, because I found that sort of the junior doctor years really tough on my body. I'm not someone that can sleep during the day. I really do need my sleep-wake cycle structured and routine. And so that sort of crossed off a lot of things that I would have loved to have done because I just wasn't made out for that shift work. And I found myself in that SRMO year just a little bit lost and still unsure. And yeah, I think I was needing something outside of medicine to reset and restore and rejuvenate and to, yeah, just look after myself, care for myself. And my brother at the time was really into yoga, and I guess he just knew me, and yeah, it was a perfect fit. I was really lucky. And then it became almost religious. I would go every day. When I was an advanced trainee, I would leave work bang on time to get to the yoga class. And it was how I got through and not only survived, but, did very well. Um, I remember doing those warrior poses with my drishti over my right middle finger, and I was like, we've got this, like in that mindset of getting through exams, like you've got this, you've got it. Really was a wonderful way to cultivate self-compassionate discipline and self-worth and mastery. Yeah.
Got
Yoga.
it. Yeah.
People are always going like, oh, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible, but it's just so much more than flexibility. Mind you, I'm very flexible, so I accept that.
I think you get better if you practice too.
Sure, well, part of the yoga is noticing judgments, and it's really not about good, bad. It's just about where you land in the
Yeah.
moment and
Mm.
being with yourself on the mat and being open to the differences of any day. There's a lot to
Mhm.
learn. Yeah, it's very behavioral.
Mm. Interesting. If you don't mind, going back to those junior years before you had your year off, you said resentful. What were the sorts of things that you were not enjoying, was too hard, didn't like about the public hospital
Ah,
system that was really creating that hurt and harm for you?
look, everything that's in the literature. But at the time, I thought it was just me. I felt like a failure, I was like, oh, I'm not cut out for it. I need to be tougher, blah, blah, blah. But now it's just everywhere you look in the evidence base. It's poor work design. It's, constantly changing terms. It's having different teams with different expectations, insufficient supervision and support, a lot of bullying, discrimination, harassment, and a lot of sexism. A lot of male supervisors that didn't clash, like I guess personality clashes, I'm not sure, but
Mm.
I had a quite a hard time as a strong, intelligent woman, um, and thinking differently. What else? Yeah, the lack of autonomy. I was often asked to do things that was completely ridiculous. So, for example, as an intern, no, actually, it was like a first term resident, so just done an internship. I was asked to go to a rural hospital and do the night shift in the ICU, in the ICU. I'd never had any training in ventilation or those machines before, and at first I thought it must have been a mistake, and they were like, "Oh no, yeah," and I was like, "This is completely inappropriate, no," and so
Mm.
just being put in positions where I had to say no, um, when you're junior and your reputation's on the line and you're people pleasing and jumping through hoops, you're in that mindset of like vulnerability. Um,
Mhm.
and also really wearing a mask because you well, at the time, people weren't talking about this stuff. And so it was really common to think you were the only one. Later, as a register, I did mindfulness talks at intern orientation, and every year I would say, hey, put your hands up if you think you don't know how you got here, like somehow you accidentally passed your exams, there's been some sort of error in the system and you don't think that you know enough to be here, and it's kind of a bit unbelievable. And literally everyone puts their hands up. And then I say, take a pause, look around, and just the shoulders drop. I mean, there's a few people that, don't put their hands up. I don't know what comes of those people. I have some ideas, but it really is this shame, I think, this quiet suffering that I felt at the time. And it's really refreshing to see that things are different now. You talk to the more junior doctors, they really are empowered and they're speaking up and they have boundaries and they're saying this isn't good enough. And that's wonderful. But yeah, back in my day, and I heard a lot of that as well. Senior doctors going, oh, you know, back in my day it was much tougher, and just the most invalidating thing you could say to someone and completely irrelevant. I mean, we were practicing in a highly litigious culture, and back in their day there wasn't medical indemnity. You know, patients died and that was just what happened. So anyway, it was just a tough 2 years, but you know, I got through. Did I enjoy it? Parts of it. It was still a privilege, but yeah, I was just starting to think very realistically, like, I'm young, there's a lot I can do with my life. Is this really what I choose for myself?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, after that huge investment in time to get there, to say, I'm going to pause, even that's courageous. And then to say, I'm young enough to go and do something else if I choose to, even that's courageous. I don't think I had any of those thoughts in my head going through those junior years.
I think
That's
I've always had
showing
a really like astute realization of this one fleeting precious life, and I didn't want to waste it. And yeah, I think if you have that sort of awareness every day, just check in, like, where am I at? Things working for me, error correct, whatever. Am I floating along with my values and priorities? It really does lead to, you know, a life that works for you. And that was a very confronting time in my life that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, yeah. And almost directionless, because the people in North America may not understand so much, but you come out in Australia as an intern and then an undifferentiated germ cell of a doctor, where you get to choose what you want to be eventually, but you just get to hang around in the hospital doing different terms until you figure out what you want to be in life, rather than this in medical school, I will choose what I want to be for the rest of my life and I will then either get in or not get in on a match, and then we go from there. It's quite a different system. So just wanting to help them understand where and what was going on when you went back saying, well, I don't know if I want to do psych or rehab. That might be a foreign concept to the North
Or any
Americans.
of it. Yeah. And then now there's added even worse pressures these days, and this is probably international, about getting into training programs. So
Yeah,
it's like the stress of, oh my God, you know, a lot of the younger doctors are thinking, I've got to do a master's and a PhD in addition to all of that. So yeah, it's not easy. The junior years are
yeah.
not.
No. Okay, so then you did this mindfulness talk with the junior doctors.
Yep.
What does that look like? So you've sort of shown them that they might feel like they're an imposter. What are the tools? What are the ideas you're giving to us right at the beginning of our career that might be helpful?
Well, back then, people didn't really know what mindfulness was. So I was just sort of introducing this self-awareness skill really for like human mastery. So I was trying to get it into people's minds as like a skill set based off neuroscience, as opposed to anything sort of holistic and wellnessy at the time. Um, because I felt that a lot of the issues in medicine were around a lack of self-awareness, interpersonal skills, emotion regulation in doctors when we're in these positions of power, leadership, under time pressure with lots of demands placed on us. There's so much scope for mindfulness there. So I was like, hey guys, let's know about this. Let's talk about it. So I basically was just teaching them what it was. We watched a really hilarious video. I can share the link. And worked through the neuroscience, the evidence for it, and we practiced some of it. And it was also part of, I would teach mindfulness in the hospitals to staff. So a lot of admin would come in the lunch breaks, majoritively not doctors because they couldn't get lunch breaks. And then also I was teaching intern wellness sessions at the time, and researching the utility and relevance of them. So it was just all part of this phase of what I was doing at that stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, talk us through rehab. How did that go in terms of becoming a rehabilitation doctor, and what did you kind of do with that career, or doing with that career?
So I feel like the training was very variable depending on the supervisor. And I had one particular supervisor who touched my soul. Unfortunately, he's now passed, Professor Gary Pierce, incredible man. And he really did help me get through and believed in me. taught me a lot of life skills. But then I had some other supervisors that bullied me. So it was a really tough training. I got through like the studies and the projects easily, and the patient work easy, but it was more the supervision and the teaching style and the jumping through hoops. And I actually ended up doing very well, and I got the fellowship prize for Australia and New Zealand, which I attribute to my mindfulness skills, because it's an OSCE based exam where you've just got to let things go and move on and like notice the thoughts, let them go. Anyway, so that was great. And then in my advanced training year, which was my final year, I had completed my fellowship requirements, and it was just, burning time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And that was when I had a big interpersonal challenge with one of the senior supervisors there. So that was the hardest year. And then I got pregnant. So I decided that I would just give myself permission to be pregnant. I had just finished being a board director for the Royal Australian College of Physicians, and I'd been doing a lot of governance stuff on, rehab committees, college training committees around improving the culture of medicine, which was what sort of kept me in the game. I think I had to be a part of the positive change to stay. And when I fell pregnant, I was like, the board term finished, I had finished my training. So I just took like an easy job, was pregnant, enjoyed the early years of my son, and then just slowly got back into rehab work as a fellow. And that looks like just odd jobs, really, medico-legal stuff, insurance work, locum work, I flew clinics, a few sort of posts at various hospitals that were short term. I did have a staff specialist position for 1 year. But yeah, so it's just been a real mixed bag, and I've sort of just taken the work that comes to me. I've had some really amazing privileged experiences working, setting up systems for various online health groups. So it's been really varied and allowed me a lot of autonomy and flexibility, which I have loved, but also been hard in the sense that I don't have job security. I don't have like a department. I'm not captured by a public hospital system, which really is very secure in terms of hospital indemnity and all that support. So yeah, I just kind of just take it one day at a time now, but I'm still doing all the governance stuff and working in the wellness space and sort of promoting a more nurturing, supportive medical culture.
Yeah. Tell us how it looks to have a supportive, nurturing medical culture. Are you concentrating more in the hospital spaces, in private outpatient? Where do you tend to do that work, and what does it look like?
Yeah, look, I think there are a lot of stakeholders when it comes to the healthcare system, and we all have a role to play and a responsibility to improving the culture. It's so complicated and so chronically unwell. My role at the moment is very much as a physician, and I am the chair of the College Member Health and Wellbeing Committee, and we are hosting wellbeing advocate webinars. And so just really promoting physicians to step up and be a part of this sort of move and contribute in the ways they can, promoting work that helps a more nurturing culture. I guess it is mainly in the public health system, but that's not to say it isn't relevant and important in the private sector. I've done lots of locums in private, but I'm not permanently based in a private hospital. I think that wherever you touch the healthcare system is an opportunity to role model the traits that we want to see in health professionals, to say no or accept certain behaviors, to take on board issues and find what the root causes are and advocate for data-driven interventions to be trialed. So for me, I just speak up when I'm asked to. So for example, your podcast, I'm not sure how we connected, but it's a privilege. And I absolutely, if I can be someone that, speaks up about these issues and just helps the conversation continue, then that's something I can do. I also run retreats for doctors to promote well-being. And that's been really wonderful and creative and fulfilling, because the doctors love it. And, you see how connected they get from their attendants, and they validate each other, and it really sort of lifts them up. So that's very inspiring work. And hoping to sort of expand that slowly over time. You can't do everything, but oh, sorry. A notification.
Are those retreats doctors who know each other work closely together, or they're just open for anyone to attend, but you're creating a connection with potentially strangers who have commonality?
It is totally strangers with commonality. Some people come with friends. It started off just physicians, and now it's just any doctor, because the retreats are very much around connection and community and well-being, yoga, mindfulness, but it's also CPD. So I help people work through some of those medical Board of Australia, APRA, CPD requirements. And because we all share the main things, then we can all come together. But it is predominantly physicians, I suppose, because that's sort of where people know me. But yeah, so that's something else I do.
Can you give us an example of where you've seen a culture improvement within a team or within a space or a department, something that maybe you observed or has been demonstrated to you, or what it might look like to have that change of culture?
Yeah, I think it really does. The tone from the top really does set sort of the culture of a department, doesn't it? So I think that we can all reflect on departments where there's been, not so healthy culture and certain people in those positions of power, and then also departments where everyone's sort of collegiate and innovative and collaborative and things like that. I think a really good example of culture change is the Sydney Health Network. Back in my day, when I just started speaking up, unfortunately, there were some tragic suicides of young registrars, and that really catapulted a huge shift in systems and governance in Sydney. And they appointed Dr. Bethan Richens, who is a gastroenterologist, and she's Australia's first Chief Medical Wellbeing Officer. And she's done incredible work over the years. It's a funded position, so she's paid to do this work because it's a huge amount of work. You can't possibly do all these things while you're practicing clinically. And they have interventions like colleague support. They have a GP app that promotes interns to have their own GP. They have art lessons. They have a choir. They have a debriefing pro forma sort of program now, which acknowledges adverse events and connects people to debrief and acknowledge the emotions and the facts and learn from things. So that's incredible. And now you see they really are the gold standard, I think, in Australia. An example that I came across through my clinical work was I was working in a more regional hospital, and there was I guess the leadership just wasn't there. And it was a rehab ward, so a multidisciplinary group team. And there was quite a lot of divide between the nursing, the allied health, the doctors. And it just was sad. There was so much opportunity on the ward. They had space for a dining room, for a garden. And I was there for quite a long time. And so we started a planning day, because I'd learnt that from another hospital that I went to. They had these planning days, which was really useful. And people would come together and say, oh, these are the issues and this is what we should do. And they'd plan for changes. So we started our planning days. And by the end of my term there, everyone was more sort of cohesive. They were getting along. We had pro forma sheets for case conferences and family meetings, so there was more routine structure. There was a garden. They re-established the dining room. But I think the main difference there was relationships. So workplace culture is very much around relationships and how we're relating to each other, whether or not people feel safe to speak up around problems, and heard without, risk of harm to reputation, and also opportunities to engage in improvement. So everyone's part of that silver lining. I think there's a lot of work being done at the moment around diversity and inclusivity. Racism is still a major issue in the healthcare system, and I think there's changes in some areas where they're improving sort of cultural safety through certain benchmarking standards, and I am seeing changes. So I'm really positive about where things are heading for medicine.
I like that. That sounds really good. I'm pleased to hear that there has been change and recognition and of the problems, and then the even stepping towards what does it look like for us to change in our environment, and working that how do we work together piece. That was really, really important, because I think that when you're sitting there in a bad culture and you're like, how do we make this better? How do we start improving relations? How would we even begin? I think even that we meet together and we have improvement meetings. Like, oh, there you go.
Yes, I think that a lot is, a lot of answers come from just asking the questions, like what are the problems and what are the solutions? But it's just whether or not people in those positions of power to, throw the money at the solutions are listening and engaged. I do think there's a lot of scope in the future. Well, the future will, there'll be a lot of focus in ELT and CEOs of healthcare groups around workplace culture and workplace health and safety with the recent legislation change, because accountability is now becoming way more in the spotlight, which is a good thing.
Yeah. The nurturing culture, was the nurturing about the workers within their culture, or patient experience? Are you more looking at the healthcare workers within the culture? Where do you see your
Yeah,
place now?
yes, more the healthcare workers, I think, because if you nurture the health professionals, they are the nurturers, and then they can, be there for the patients. But you really can't be expecting certain standards of care when the person trying to provide that is burnt out or feels bullied, or has nothing in their cup to give. I think there's a lot of compassion fatigue now as well, and moral injury suffered by staff, especially by healthcare staff, and this is across the sector. It's not just doctors and trainees. It really is, unfortunately quite common now, because the demands placed on people working in the hospital system are so high, and it's it's hard to know that you can't necessarily offer the care that the person in front of you needs, just based on the resources available to you, the time pressure. I think definitely there needs to be, the nurturance probably came more from this training background. Like as a trainee, I felt that the education style of a lot of supervisors was more teaching through humiliation or criticism, as opposed to curiosity of learning and nurturing your strengths, and even nurturing your weaknesses. But it's through that through building psychological safety and a calm, engaged frontal lobe. That's how you learn. There's no point trying to teach someone that's freaking out and is completely terrified they're going to get failed or whatnot. So yeah, I think there's a lot of room for nurturance in medicine.
Yeah. Tell us more about the diversity in medicine and things that you're seeing coming through as ways to address that culture shift, the embracing of diversity in medicine. How do we move some of that of what we've seen forever?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. APRA in Australia, the Australian Health Regulatory Body, does a medical training survey every year. and it's consistently showing quite confronting high rates of bullying, discrimination, harassment, and racism in trainees and minority groups. So also, females, non-binary, international medical graduates, and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done there about including, minority groups and educating staff, supervisors on cultural safety and training skills and things like that. There's also, I think, a future. I think that there'll be more discussion in the future around being neurotypical versus neurodivergent in medicine. I think there are a lot of doctors out there that are neurodivergent and either don't know or don't embrace that out of fear of judgment. And it's through our difference that we can really come together as a more broad skill set. And there's not, I feel like a lot of the work that is offered to you once you get your ticket is kind of a one size fits all, and a lot of doctors don't fit it. So I think when you're talking to your clients and people are speaking on this podcast around building your own sustainable medical career, it really is fundamentally about understanding yourself, being open and trying to be non-judgmental about your strengths and challenges, and then designing your own unique career and just embracing that difference and running your own race in the sense that you're not competing, but you are able to go, this is not for me, it doesn't fit, and that's okay. I think the more we embrace diversity and different styles of thinking and different skill sets, the more solutions we'll have to improve the healthcare system. But again, if you are someone that finds the environment of the hospital abrasive, maybe there's sensory sensitivities there, or the lifestyle work-life balance isn't such that you can meet your holistic health needs, then that's okay too. You don't have to stay in that, classic career. You can create your own and give yourself that permission to be different.
Yeah. I think that's very much the hard work is, what do I need? Why am I not thriving here? What is it about this system that isn't working for me? Is there changes that could happen here that could help me? What do I need to ask for? Or do I need to move on to some other environment that could support me with what I need to be able to do what I can do? It's such a big, broad question, is what do you need to be successful today? And saying, you just start with a big, empty, blank piece of paper, and you're like, I don't know what I want, or how to even ask for it.
There's so much that confuses us, right? Like you mentioned sunk cost bias earlier. That's true. If you're invested in a job and you're just not happy, and you think, oh, I've put so much time and energy into this position, or what about positions where there are some good things there, but then there's other things that just aren't working for you. And so it's like, well, what's the tipping point? What's, when do you leave if it's all gray zone, and yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for just saying, okay, what are my values? What are my priorities? What are the challenges here? And what are the challenges that I can control? And what are the ones that I can't? And you just focus your efforts on making decisions aligned with your values and priorities and trying to modify the challenges you can control. And if you do all that and you're not happy, then you need to just take the leap and have faith the net will come, and it does. But some of the hardest decisions I've made, the scariest, biggest decisions, were the best steps to complete transformation and freedom. Like leaving Sydney was very, very hard, but I'm glad I did. I had to say no to a full-time job at one stage. That was very, very hard. I'm glad I did. So you do have to just be a bit bold and brave sometimes to make the move that means you can stay working as a doctor when you hit a hump. It's scary.
Yeah, totally. It's scary. We can reinvent ourselves, though, I think is what you're saying, is get that support you need and then be able to make those decisions about what it is that's going to create sustainability for you. Love this. How do people find you? Look into you, figure out how your retreats work. How do they do all of that?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's called Anorexia Collective, and I have a LinkedIn account, which is probably just my professional profile. I'm on Instagram as well, and the retreats are in Australia. So if there are any Australian doctors interested, the sales are through Humanitics. But yeah, I can give you some links to put in your show notes. That might be the easiest. You can always just send me an email. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Good. Anything we didn't talk about that you want to highlight here before we finish up?
I wrote a book.
Tell
I'd love
us
to
about your
talk
book.
about I know I'm doing a terrible job at promoting it, I have to say, but it's very hard to find the time to do all the things which I'm sure you relate to, Sarah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Mastering Real Wellness, and it is basically my expression of a manifesto around human mastery. So it's all the skills that I use day in, day out, and I teach my patients. And we talk about wellness, which is the most vague term. What does it really mean? There's no universal definition, but real wellness, that feeling of contentment, that sort of, I'm content with where I'm at. I can look after myself in the ways I need most of the time. It comes from self-mastery. So I believe that's to be three things. It's self-awareness, self-acceptance, and adaptive, flexible self-care. And if you can do that most of the time, you will feel well, and you will feel well despite your age, if you live with chronic disease and disability, whatever you look like, because it's about the relationship you hold with yourself as opposed to, trying to fit in and people please. So yeah, it was a big piece of work that I started in COVID and I self-published last year. So yeah, I'm proud of it. I think it's very useful, and honestly, when I find myself stuck or unsure about something or just not quite, where I want to be, I come back to those skills time and time again. And it's amazing how much my patients can be receptive to this stuff and use it, which is pretty cute. And I teach it at the retreats, a lot of these things. I speak about these things. So it's nice to have a book, to offer.
Yeah. Do we find it on Amazon, or where do you get it?
Yeah, you can buy it on my site. You can buy it on Amazon. I'm not sure about which bookshops and libraries have them, sorry, but
No,
yeah,
that's okay.
Google Mastering Real Wellness by Dr. Susannah Ward, it should come up. So yeah, hopefully it's a
Perfect.
read.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to reading it, actually. I think that sounds like it's right in line with all the things for this year. Thank you for this conversation. I think that we could all do with some improved culture and nurturing and improving diversity within medicine. Absolutely. So thank you very much for being here today.
Pleasure. Take care. Good luck with the podcast and enjoy your work down in, where was it that you are?
In Mariba, in far north Queensland.
Wow.
All right, guys.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
See you, Sarah.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.